The morning sun was just rising over New York City when the sky changed forever. Dark shadows fell across the streets as massive ships appeared overhead. They were huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ships looked like floating cities made of black metal and strange lights. People stopped walking and stared up. Cars pulled over. Everyone pointed at the sky with their mouths open. The alien ships hung there like storm clouds that would never move. Similar ships appeared over London, Tokyo, Moscow, and every other major city on Earth. Within an hour, the whole world was looking up at their new visitors. Dae-hyun Kim was in his office at the United Nations building when his assistant ran, and the young man was breathing hard and his face was pale. "Sir, you need to see this right now," he said, turning on the large screen on the wall. News reports from around the world showed the same thing. Giant alien ships hovering over cities. Military jets flew around them like tiny insects, but the ships paid no attention. They just floated there, silent and waiting. Dae-hyun had been the UN Secretary General for 3 years. He had dealt with wars, natural disasters, and political problems, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. He picked up his secure phone and started making calls to world leaders. Within 2 hours, an emergency meeting was called. Leaders from every major nation connected by video link. Some were in underground bunkers, others were in military command centers. Everyone looked worried except for a few faces that seemed strangely calm. "Has anyone tried to communicate with them?" asked the President of the United States. "We've sent radio signals on every frequency we know," replied the British Prime Minister. "No response so far." Dae-hyun was about to speak when every screen in the world suddenly changed. Television broadcasts, computer monitors, phone screens, and even digital billboards all showed the same image. An alien face appeared, and when it spoke, everyone on Earth could understand it perfectly. The creature had pale blue skin and large black eyes. Its face was longer than a human face, and it had no visible nose. When it spoke, its voice was deep and echoing. "People of Earth," the alien said, "I am Supreme Commander Thexara of the Velkari Empire. Your world has been chosen for integration into our civilization. You have 72 hours to surrender, completely. Your military forces must stand down. Your governments must transfer all authority to us. Your people must prepare for relocation to work colonies." The alien paused, and its black eyes seemed to look directly at each person watching. "This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is the natural order of the galaxy. Strong civilizations guide weak ones. We have done this with 437 worlds before yours. Each one is now peaceful and productive under our rule." Images appeared behind the alien showing other planets. Beautiful cities filled with different alien species, all working together under Velkari supervision. It looked peaceful and organized. "Resistance is pointless," the alien continued. "Our technology is thousands of years ahead of yours. Our fleets control half the galaxy. Accept your place in the greater order, and your people will be treated well. Resist, and your planet will be cleansed for other uses." The transmission ended. Every screen went back to normal programming, but nobody was watching regular shows anymore. The world had just been given an ultimatum. In the UN emergency meeting, several leaders started talking at once. The president of France was demanding immediate military action. The Chinese representative was calculating economic impacts. The Russian leader was already moving his nuclear submarines into position. "Quiet, please," Dae-hyun said calmly. "Before we make any decisions, I think we should hear from Admiral Lee and Director Park." Woo-seok Lee appeared on screen from a secure location. The admiral of the combined Earth fleet was a man in his 60s with gray hair and steady eyes. Next to him was Hee-jin Park, a woman in her 40s who ran the Earth Defense Initiative, a program most people thought was just for tracking asteroids. "Gentlemen, ladies," Admiral Lee said, "we've been expecting this day for quite some time. Several. Leaders looked confused. The German chancellor frowned. Expecting it? What do you mean? Director Park leaned forward. For the past 20 years, the Earth Defense Initiative has been more than just an asteroid tracking program. We've been monitoring deep space for signs of alien activity. We detected the Valkyrie ships 3 months ago when they entered our solar system. 3 months? The Japanese Prime Minister looked shocked. Why weren't we told? Because, Admiral Lee said with a slight smile, we needed time to prepare. And we needed the aliens to think we were surprised. Dae-hyun nodded. He had known about this secret program for 2 years. Only a few world leaders were aware of humanity's real preparations. What kind of preparations? Asked the Brazilian president. Director Park and Admiral Lee exchanged a look. The kind that might surprise our new visitors, Director Park said. On screens around the world, people were reacting to the alien message in different ways. Some were panicking, running through streets and emptying stores. Others were gathering in churches and temples to pray. But many people seemed oddly calm, as if they had been expecting this too. In Seoul, an old man watched the news and chuckled. In London, a group of engineers looked at each other and grinned. In Cairo, a woman pilot checked her equipment with steady hands. Around the world, millions of people who worked in certain jobs or had certain clearances were receiving quiet phone calls and text messages. Back in the emergency meeting, Dae-hyun stood up. I'll be addressing the world in 1 hour, he announced. I suggest everyone prepare their people for what comes next. Which is what, exactly? Demanded the Italian Prime Minister. Dae-hyun, Kim smiled. It was the same smile his grandfather had, worn when Japanese soldiers demanded his village's surrender in 1950. It was the same smile his father had shown when North Korean negotiators thought they could intimidate him. It was a smile that said, "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Which is that we're going to show our visitors something they've never encountered in their 437 conquests, Dae-hyun said. We're going to show them what humans do when someone tells us to give up. Outside, the alien ships continued to hover over the cities. They were waiting for humanity's surrender. They had done this dance hundreds of times before. It always ended the same way. But they had never met humans before, and humans had a saying about ultimatums. The more impossible the demand, the funnier it becomes. 2 days had passed since the alien ultimatum. The Valkyrie ships still hung in the sky like dark thunderclouds, but something strange was happening. Instead of surrendering or panicking, humans seemed to be getting more organized by the hour. Supreme. Commander Thexara stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring down at the small blue planet. In his 300 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. Usually, primitive worlds either surrendered immediately or fought desperately for a few hours before being crushed. But these humans were doing neither. Commander, his aide approached carefully. The deadline has passed, but they have not surrendered. However, they also have not attacked us. Thexara's black eyes narrowed. What are they doing? They appear to be preparing for something. Our sensors show increased activity around their planet, but we cannot determine the exact nature of their actions. On Earth, world leaders were gathering in a secret underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. The place was massive, carved deep into solid rock, and filled with technology that looked far more advanced than anything the public had ever seen. Ji-hoon Choi walked through corridors lined with screens showing star charts and spacecraft designs. As head of the secret space program, he had been waiting for this moment for 20 years. Behind him followed dozens of officials who were seeing this place for the first time. Ladies and gentlemen, Ji-hoon said, as they entered a huge chamber. Welcome to humanity's real space program. The chamber was enormous, big enough to hold several football stadiums. Giant screens covered the walls, showing images of space stations, mining operations on asteroids, and sleek spacecraft that looked nothing like the simple rockets the public knew about. The German chancellor stared in amazement. This is impossible. How long has this been operating? The planning started 200 years ago, Ji-hoon replied calmly. The first secret facilities were built in 1823. We've been preparing for this day ever since. So, young Kang stepped forward. She was the chief engineer of hidden technologies, a small woman with bright eyes and steady hands. Everything you thought you knew about human space capability was carefully designed to fool outside observers. Our public space program was never meant to be impressive. It was meant to be a distraction. She pressed a button, and the screens changed to show what looked like ordinary asteroid mining stations. But as the images zoomed in, the stations revealed themselves to be enormous military bases, complete with shipyards, weapons factories, and defensive systems. We've been mining asteroids for over 50 years, So Young continued. But not just for minerals. We've built a complete industrial network throughout the solar system. Mars has underground cities with millions of people. The asteroid belt has manufacturing facilities that can build a battleship in 3 days. Even the moon has been hollow for decades. The Brazilian president looked confused. But our satellites, our space telescopes, how did we not see this? So Young smiled. Because we control most of your satellites, and your space telescopes have been showing you exactly what we wanted you to see. Another man approached the group. Tai Min Yoon was tall and serious, with the bearing of a career military officer. He commanded something called the Ghost Fleet, though nobody in the room had heard of it until today. Commander Yoon, Dae-hyun Kim said, please show our guests what we've been building. Taemin nodded and spoke into a small device on his wrist. Ghost Fleet Command, this is Commander Yoon. Operation Revelation, Authorization Alpha 7, the R. Screens around the chamber changed again. This time they showed empty space around Earth and the other planets. But slowly, shapes began to appear as if they were materializing from nothing. First one ship, then 10, then hundreds, then thousands. Stealth technology, Taemin explained as everyone stared. We've had ships hidden throughout the solar system for years. Our smallest destroyers are twice the size of anything in our public navy. Our largest battleships are bigger than the alien vessels currently orbiting Earth. The ships on screen were beautiful and deadly looking. They had smooth curves and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Some were clearly warships, bristling, with weapon ports and armor. Others looked like they could carry thousands of people or massive amounts of supplies. How many ships do you have? Asked the French president in a whisper. Currently operational, about 12,000 combat vessels, plus support ships, Taemin replied, as if he was discussing the weather. We can build more if needed. Our shipyards have been running at full capacity for decades. Above Earth's atmosphere, Valkyrie sensors were starting to detect strange readings, energy signatures that didn't match their databases, movement patterns. That suggested technology they didn't recognize. But their computers dismissed most of it as sensor errors or natural phenomena. After all, this was a primitive world that had barely reached its own moon. Back in the underground facility, So Young was demonstrating a small device that looked like a simple metal cube. This is our quantum drive system. It allows faster than light, travel without the dimensional tiers that most galactic civilizations use. It's quieter, more efficient, and completely undetectable by standard scanning methods. She placed the cube on a table and activated it. The cube simply vanished, then reappeared a moment later on the other side of the room. Our weapon systems are similarly advanced, she continued, picking up what looked like a simple flashlight. Plasma-based energy weapons that can cut through any known armor, gravity manipulation devices that can crush enemy ships or create protective fields, and some other things that are, well, let's call them creative solutions to military problems. The Japanese Prime Minister was taking notes frantically. But how? How did you develop all this in secret? Ji-hoon smiled, very carefully, and with help from some friends who preferred to remain anonymous until now. Friends? Dae-hyun raised an eyebrow. Did you think humans were the only species in the galaxy who didn't like being conquered? Ji-hoon asked. We've had quiet contact with other civilizations for over a century. Rebels, exiles, and freedom fighters from dozens of worlds. They shared technology, we shared resources and hiding places. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you work together. Above them, in the Valkyrie flagship, alarms were starting to sound. Scanner operators were reporting impossible readings from the human planet, energy levels that suggested advanced technology, ship signatures that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Impossible, Thexara muttered. Our intelligence. Reports showed they barely had chemical rockets. Sir, his aide said nervously, perhaps we should request reinforcements before proceeding with planetary bombardment. Thexara considered this. In his long career, he had learned to trust his instincts. And right now, his instincts were telling him that something was very wrong with this conquest. Send a message to Imperial Command, he ordered. Tell them we may need additional forces for this operation. On Earth, in the secret facility, Dae-hyun Kim was addressing the world leaders, who were still trying to process everything they had seen. The aliens gave us 72 hours to surrender, he said calmly. That deadline passed yesterday. I suspect they're trying to figure out why we haven't either surrendered or been destroyed yet. So what happens now? Asked the Canadian Prime. Minister Dae-hyun smiled that same confident smile. Now we stop pretending to be helpless. It's time to show the Valkyrie Empire what humans are really capable of. Outside, hidden throughout the solar system, thousands of human ships were powering up their weapons systems and preparing for the first real battle Earth had ever fought. The Valkyrie thought they were dealing with primitive natives. They were about to discover they had challenged the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Supreme Commander Thexara had waited long enough. 3 days had passed since the deadline, and the humans still had not surrendered. His superiors in the Valkyrie Empire were asking uncomfortable questions. It was time to demonstrate why resistance was pointless. Begin the attack, he commanded. Target their major cities first. Once they see our power, they will surrender quickly. The massive Valkyrie ships moved into attack formation. Energy weapons that could melt mountains began to charge. This was how it always went. A show of overwhelming force, then complete surrender. Simple and efficient. But as the first Valkyrie ship fired its main weapon toward New York City, something impossible happened. The energy beam simply disappeared. It didn't hit a shield or bounce off armor. It just vanished into empty air as if it had never existed. What just happened? Thexara demanded. Unknown, sir. Our weapon fired normally, but the energy discharge seems to have been absorbed somehow. Then the human ships appeared. They materialized out of empty space like ghosts becoming solid. Hundreds of them surrounding the Valkyrie fleet in perfect formation. The ships were sleek and dark, with smooth curves that made them look more grown than built. From the bridge of one of these ships, General Dongwu Jang watched the alien vessels with calm interest. He had been planning this moment for 15 years. As General of Unconventional Warfare, his job was to think of ways to fight that the enemy would never expect. All ships, this is General Jang, he spoke into his communication system. Remember, we're not trying to fight like they do. We're going to fight like humans, confuse them, surprise them, and make them wonder what we'll do next. The first human ship to attack was the Soul's Revenge, commanded by Captain Miran Song. Her ship was different from the others. It looked normal from the outside, but it had been built with a very special capability. As Valkyrie ships turned to fire on the Soul's Revenge, something amazing happened. The ship suddenly split apart into 5 smaller vessels, each one flying in a different direction. The alien weapons aimed at one target hit empty space instead. Impossible, breathed the Velkari weapons officer. Ships cannot divide themselves in combat. Ours can, Captain Song said with a grin, even though the aliens couldn't hear her. She pressed a button, and her 5 small ships suddenly came back together, forming her original vessel again. But now she was behind the Velkari formation, and her weapons were already firing. The human plasma beams cut through Velkari armor like it was paper. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. On another part of the battlefield, something even stranger was happening. A group of human ships was acting like they had been badly damaged. They drifted slowly toward the Velkari vessels, sending out distress signals and appearing to leak atmosphere. The Velkari commander smiled. Finally, the humans were showing proper fear. He ordered his ships to move in and finish off the damaged vessels. But as the Velkari ships got close, the damaged human vessels suddenly exploded. Not from weapons fire, but deliberately. They had been rigged as giant bombs, and their crews had evacuated to other ships before the battle began. The explosions destroyed 3 Velkari ships and damaged several others. General Zhang watched approvingly from his command ship. "That's the human way," he said to his officers. "If we're going to lose a ship anyway, let's make sure it takes some enemies with it." But the strangest part of the battle was happening, near Earth's moon, where pilot Kyung-Soo Nam was leading a squadron of experimental fighters. These small ships looked almost primitive compared to the massive Velkari vessels, but they moved in ways that seemed to defy physics. Kyung-Soo had been trained as an atmospheric pilot before joining the secret space program. He flew his fighter, like it was still in Earth's sky, using techniques that worked in air combat, but should have been impossible in space. He dove down toward a Velkari ship, even though there was no up or down in space. He barrel-rolled around enemy fire as if he was avoiding missiles in an atmosphere. He used the gravity of nearby asteroids to change direction in ways that confused the alien targeting computers. "These humans fight like madmen," reported a Velkari pilot. "Their tactics make no sense. They attack from impossible angles and use maneuvers that our computers say are inefficient." "Inefficient, maybe," Kyung-Soo said as he destroyed another alien fighter, "but effective." The Velkari had built their military tactics around thousands of years of galactic warfare. They knew the most efficient ways to deploy fleets, the best formations for maximum firepower, and the proper procedures for orbital bombardment. But humans didn't care about proper procedures. Human ships rammed into Velkari vessels at full speed, using their quantum drives to appear right next to enemy hulls before self-destructing. Mining equipment that had been converted into weapons fired streams of molten metal that cut through armor like butter. Even garbage haulers had been turned into missile platforms, launching clouds of debris that confused enemy sensors. "Sir," a Velkari tactical officer reported to Thexara, "the humans are using asteroids as weapons. They're moving them with gravity, manipulators, and throwing them at our ships." "Asteroids?" Thexara couldn't believe what he was hearing. "They're throwing rocks at us?" "Very large rocks, sir, moving very fast." The worst part for the Velkari was that the human tactics worked. Ships that should have been easy targets were destroying vessels 10 times their size. Fighters that looked like toys were outmaneuvering advanced alien interceptors, and the human commanders seemed to treat the whole battle like a game they were enjoying. Captain Song had recombined her ship for the 4th time and was now attacking a Velkari command vessel. "This is more fun than the simulations," she told her crew. "These aliens fight so predictably." Her weapons officer grinned as he fired another plasma burst. "Should we try the spinning maneuver next?" "Why not? Let's see if we can make them dizzy." The Soul's Revenge began rotating as it flew, firing in all directions as it spun. The Velkari ships tried to target it, but their computers couldn't track a vessel that was attacking while spinning like a top. Meanwhile, General Zhang was coordinating attacks from ships that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. His vessels would materialize, fire everything they had, then vanish again before the enemy could respond. It was like fighting shadows that could bite back. "Status report," he requested. 17 Velkari ships destroyed, 11 badly damaged, his tactical officer replied. "We've lost 3 ships, with minimal crew casualties thanks to the evacuation protocols." General Zhang nodded. The human strategy was working perfectly. They weren't trying to fight a traditional space battle. They were treating it like a puzzle, to solve, using creativity and unpredictability instead of overwhelming force. High above the battle, Supreme Commander Thexara watched his fleet being torn apart by tactics he had never seen before. Ships that split apart and recombined. Vessels that exploded on purpose. Fighters that moved like atmospheric aircraft in the vacuum of space. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "perhaps we should request those reinforcements now." Thexara stared down at the blue planet that was supposed to have been an easy conquest. For the first time in his 300 years of military service, he was beginning to understand what fear felt like. "Send the message," he ordered. "Tell Imperial Command that we need everything they can spare. These humans, they don't fight like any species we've ever encountered." Down on Earth in the secret command center, Dae-hyun Kim watched the battle reports with satisfaction. The human fleet was performing exactly as hoped. "Phase 1 complete," he announced, to the room. "The Velkari now know they're in a real fight. Time to show them what humans do when we're just getting started." News of the human victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. On worlds that had been under Velkari rule for centuries, people gathered around hidden communication devices to hear the impossible reports. The mighty Velkari Empire, conquerors of hundreds of planets, had been defeated by a species that most aliens had never heard of. On the planet Ketra, in a secret underground meeting room, resistance fighters who had been planning rebellion for decades suddenly found new hope. Their leader, an old alien with 4 arms and green skin, listened to the reports with amazement. "Is this real?" he asked. "The humans actually won?" "Not just one," replied his communication officer. "They destroyed half the Velkari fleet and sent the rest running. The Empire is calling for reinforcements from across the galaxy." Meanwhile, on Earth, Ambassador Insu Huang was having the busiest week of his career. As ambassador to liberated alien species, his job had been mostly theoretical until now. But suddenly, every secret resistance group in the galaxy wanted to talk to humanity. His office was filled with alien communication devices, each one crackling with messages from different worlds. The Zentari rebels wanted weapons. The Corvin freedom fighters needed military advisors. The Helix colonies were asking for ships to transport refugees. "Sir," his assistant said, as she brought him another stack of messages, "we're receiving over 1,000 requests per hour. Everyone wants help with their own rebellion against the Velkari." Insu smiled as he read through the messages. Each one represented a world that had been waiting for this moment, sometimes for hundreds of years. "Start prioritizing by strategic value," he told his assistant. "Focus on worlds with industrial capacity or important locations, and send copies of everything." To Coordinator Lim, Yoonji Lim was working 18-hour days in her role as coordinator of interstellar alliances. Her job was to turn the growing rebellion into an organized resistance movement. The challenge was enormous. She had to coordinate with alien species that had never worked together, using technology that was still mostly secret, while fighting an enemy that controlled half the galaxy. "The good news," she told the emergency council meeting, "is that everyone wants to fight the Velkari. The bad news is that most of them have been enslaved for so long, they've forgotten how to fight effectively." General Dongwu Jiang leaned forward. "What do they need most?" "Training, weapons, and confidence," Yoonji replied immediately. "Many of these worlds have weapons hidden away, but their people haven't fought a real battle in generations. They need to remember how to win. We can provide training. the general said. Our unconventional warfare methods should work well for resistance movements. Small groups, surprise attacks, making the enemy afraid to leave their bases. Captain Sung-Ho Oh was already putting these plans into action. As captain of diplomatic missions, his job was to make contact with alien worlds and offer them support. But his ships were also carrying something more valuable than weapons or supplies. They were carrying hope. His first stop was the planet, Vexor, where the local resistance had been fighting the Velkari for 50 years without any major victories. When his ship appeared in their space, the aliens could hardly believe what they were seeing. "Human vessel," the Vexorian leader transmitted. "We have heard the reports, but is it true? Did you really defeat a Velkari fleet?" "We did more than defeat them," Captain O replied. "We sent them running home to ask for help, and now we're here to make sure you can do the same thing on your world." The meeting took place on O's ship, which the Vexorians found fascinating. The technology was clearly advanced, but it didn't feel cold and military like Velkari ships. The human vessel felt alive somehow, warm and welcoming. "We can provide you with weapons that will cut through Velkari armor," Captain O explained to the assembled alien resistance leaders. "We can teach you tactics that will confuse their forces and make them afraid to patrol your cities. But most importantly, we can show you that the Velkari are not invincible." One of the Vexorians, a tall creature with blue fur and large eyes, leaned forward. "What do you want in return? The Velkari promised us peace and prosperity when they first arrived. What do humans promise?" Captain O smiled. "We don't want to rule you. We don't want your resources or your people. We just want you to be free to make your own choices. After you drive the Velkari away, your world belongs to you, not to us." The aliens looked at each other in amazement. In their experience, every species that offered help also wanted something in return. Usually everything. "You would really just leave us alone after helping us win?" the Vexorian leader asked. "That's the plan," Captain O confirmed. "Though we hope you'll want to trade with us and maybe share some stories about how the battle went. Humans love hearing about creative ways to defeat bullies." Within days, similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. Human ships appeared in secret, offering weapons, training, and most importantly, proof that the Velkari could be beaten. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On the planet Zilara, mining equipment that had been hidden for decades was converted into weapons overnight. On Corvin III, resistance fighters who had been afraid to act suddenly began sabotaging Velkari installations. On the moon bases around Helix Prime, entire work crews disappeared into the tunnels, taking their tools and turning them into instruments of rebellion. But the most important changes were happening in neutral space, among alien civilizations that had so far avoided conquest. These worlds had stayed independent by being very careful never to anger the Velkari Empire. But now they were quietly reconsidering their position. The Andrari Federation called an emergency session of their ruling council. The Andrari were traders who dealt with every civilization in the galaxy, including both the Velkari and the rebels. They had stayed neutral for 300 years by being useful to everyone. "The situation has changed," announced their chief counselor, a small alien with silver skin and 6 arms. "The humans have proven that the Velkari can be defeated. If the Empire falls, we need to be on the winning side." "But what if the Empire doesn't fall?" asked another counselor. "What if they crush these rebellions like they always have?" "Then, we continue as before," the chief counselor replied. "But if the humans succeed, we want them to remember that the Andrari were their friends." The Andrari began quietly providing supplies and intelligence to human diplomatic missions. They shared star charts showing Velkari military bases, trade routes that could be used to move weapons, and most importantly, communication networks that connected resistance groups across the galaxy. Other neutral powers made similar decisions. The Thermal Collective began allowing human ships to use their space stations for refueling. The Crystal Cities started sharing their advanced sensor technology. The Void Merchants opened their hidden routes for smuggling weapons to rebel worlds. Back on Earth, the intelligence reports were both exciting and terrifying. Exciting because rebellions were starting on over 200 worlds. Terrifying because the Velkari Empire was responding with everything they had. "They're pulling fleets from all across the galaxy," reported Director Park to the Emergency Council. "Our deep space monitors show at least 50,000 Velkari ships moving toward our region of space." 50,000? General Jang whistled softly. "That's 10 times what we fought in the first battle. Which is why we're not going to fight them the same way," Dae-Hyun Kim said calmly. "Admiral Lee, how many worlds now have active resistance? Movements?" 237 at last count, Admiral Lee replied. "And more starting every day." "Then we don't need to defeat 50,000 ships," Dae-Hyun said with a smile. "We just need to make sure they can't be in 50,000 places at once." Yoon-ji Lim understood immediately. Coordinated attacks. If every world with a resistance movement hits their local Velkari forces at the same time. The Empire will have to choose, Dae-Hyun finished. Protect their core worlds, or try to hold on to their conquered territories. They can't do both. Across the galaxy, on worlds that had been enslaved for centuries, people were looking up at the stars with hope for the first time in generations. The humans had shown them something they thought they would never see again. The Velkari Empire could be beaten, and now they were going to prove it themselves. The final battle for the Velkari Empire did not happen in one place or on one day. It happened everywhere at once, across hundreds of star systems, as coordinated rebellions erupted throughout the galaxy. The empire that had ruled for 1,000 years found itself fighting for survival on every front. Admiral Yoo-Jin Ahn commanded the largest fleet in human history from her flagship, the New Soul. But her fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships flew alongside Vexorian fighters, Andrari trading vessels converted to warships, and craft from dozens of other worlds. The combined fleet stretched across several light years, a rainbow of different technologies and species working together. "Status report from all sectors," Yoo-Jin requested as she stood on the bridge watching the tactical displays. "Sector 7 reports the Velkari base at Ketra Prime has surrendered," her communications officer announced. "Sector 12 says the Corvin system is completely liberated. Sector 4, well, they're having a celebration on Zilara." Yoo-Jin smiled. Each victory report represented not just military success, but the freedom of billions of beings who had lived under Velkari rule. But she knew the hardest part was still coming. On the Velkari homeworld of Velkaris, Supreme Commander Thexara stood in the Imperial Palace, watching his civilization crumble. The massive screens that once showed the extent of his empire now displayed rebel victories and retreating Velkari forces. Half their worlds were in open rebellion, and the other half were cut off from communication. "Commander," his aide approached nervously, "the outer defense fleets have been destroyed. The human coalition is moving toward our core systems." Thexara closed his black eyes. In his nightmares, he had seen this moment coming ever since that first battle near Earth. The humans had not just defeated them militarily, they had given hope to every enslaved world in the galaxy, and hope was more dangerous than any weapon. "Prepare the final defense fleet," he ordered. "Every ship we have left. We make our stand at Velkaris." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was hopeless. The humans had taught the galaxy a new way to fight, and now everyone was using it against the Empire. 3 months later, the last Velkari resistance collapsed, not in a great battle, but in a simple conversation. President Jae-Sung Ryu of the Human Confederation sat across from Supreme Commander Thexara in a small room aboard a neutral station. Between them, the future of the galaxy was being decided. "Your empire is finished," President Ryu said quietly. "Your fleets are destroyed, your worlds are free, and your people are tired of fighting, but you still have a choice to make." Thexara looked older than his 400 years. The proud commander who had conquered worlds now looked like a tired old alien who just wanted the fighting to stop. "What choice do I have?" "You can surrender unconditionally and help us transition your remaining territories to self-governance," President Ryu explained. "In return, your people will be treated fairly and given a place in the new galactic community." "And if I refuse?" President Ryu shrugged. "Then the rebellions continue until every Velkari military installation is destroyed, and every world is free anyway, but many more people die unnecessarily, including your own people." Thexara stared at the human president. "You would really let the Velkari survive? We enslaved hundreds of worlds. We destroyed entire civilizations. Why would you show us mercy?" "Because," President Ryu said with a gentle smile, "that's what humans do. We fight bullies, but we don't become bullies ourselves. Besides, the galaxy is going to need everyone working together to rebuild." The formal surrender took place on Earth, in the same United Nations building where Dae-hyun Kim had first received the alien ultimatum. Representatives from every liberated world gathered to witness the end of the Velkari Empire and the beginning of something new. But the most important work was happening in smaller meetings throughout the galaxy, where Byung-ho Seo, chief architect of the new Galactic Charter, was helping different species figure out how to live together as equals. "The old system was simple," he explained to a gathering of alien representatives. "One species rules, everyone else obeys. But that system only works if you're the ones in charge. What we're proposing is more complicated, but more fair." The new system he described was based on human principles, but adapted for galactic civilization. No single species could dominate others. Trade would be free and fair. Disputes would be settled by negotiation, not conquest. Military forces would be used only for defense and peacekeeping. "What about enforcement?" asked a Vexorian representative. "What stops another empire from rising and conquering everyone again?" "Each other," Byung-ho replied. "Under this charter, if one world is attacked, all worlds respond. The strongest military defense is everyone working together." The Galactic Charter was signed 6 months after the Velkari surrender. Over 300 species added their names to the document, creating the largest alliance in galactic history. But the real test came when someone tried to break it. The Crimson Raiders, a group of pirates who had taken advantage of the chaos after the Empire's fall, decided to attack a small farming world called Peaceful Valley. They expected an easy conquest of defenseless farmers. Instead, they found themselves facing a combined fleet from 20 different worlds, including humans, former Velkari colonies, and even some reformed Velkari military units. The battle was over in 3 hours, and the pirates surrendered without destroying a single farm. "This actually works," Admiral An reported to President Ryu after the operation. "Different species, different technologies, different fighting styles, but we're all working toward the same goal." 1 year after the Galactic Charter was signed, former Supreme Commander Thexara requested a private meeting with Dae-hyun Kim, who was now serving as the first galactic mediator. They met in Kim's office, which had a large window showing Earth's blue sky and white clouds. "I have a question that has bothered me for months," Thexara said. "When we first demanded your surrender, your people seemed amused rather than afraid. Even before you revealed your hidden fleet, you acted like our ultimatum was somehow funny. Why?" Dae-hyun Kim leaned back in his chair and chuckled. It was the same sound he had made when he first heard the alien demands over a year ago. "Do you know what humans call it when someone demands the impossible?" "No." "A joke," Dae-hyun replied. "You told us to give up everything we were, everything we had built, everything we dreamed of becoming. You wanted us to hand over our freedom, our future, and our children's future. And you expected us to do it because you said so. Thexara tilted his head. But we had superior technology, larger fleets, more experience. Logic dictated that resistance was futile. Logic, Daehyun said with a grin, has never been humanity's strong suit. We prefer stubbornness, creativity, and a really good sense of humor. Besides, you made one crucial mistake in your calculations. Which was? You assumed that a species capable of reaching the stars would be willing to give up without a fight. But the same qualities that got us to space in the first place, curiosity, determination, and absolute refusal to accept impossible as an answer, those were never going to let us just surrender. Thexara was quiet for a long moment. And now your species has changed the entire galaxy? Not just humans, Daehyun corrected. Everyone changed the galaxy. Humans just suggested that maybe it was time for something different. Outside the window, ships from dozens of different worlds were coming and going from Earth's orbital stations. Traders, diplomats, students, and tourists from across the galaxy traveled freely between worlds that had once been bitter enemies. The old empire was gone. The new galaxy was just beginning, and somewhere in space, on a small trading ship carrying goods between former Velkari worlds, a young alien child asked her grandmother, "What were the humans like when they first defeated the Empire?" The old alien smiled and answered, "They were exactly what the galaxy needed, child. They were the ones who remembered how to laugh at bullies and then do something about them." The child nodded seriously, then asked, "Can I visit Earth someday?" "Of course you can," her grandmother replied. "That's what freedom means."